I'm so delighted here today to welcome my friend Nitin Rakesh. Nitin is a distinguished leader in the technology and financial services industry. He's the CEO and managing director of Mphasis, a company that focuses on digital design and transformation for enterprises. He's been doing this for 20 years, managing large transnational operations and delivering transformative digital solutions to Fortune 500 companies. He's a computer science engineer at heart, and Nitin has a lifelong passion for innovation and technology that has been always manifest throughout his career. Under his leadership, Mphasis, the company he is the CEO of, has set a record of highest deal wins in the history and witnessed tremendous growth in the last 4 years, going from $1.7 billion in market capitalization to nearly $5 billion as of a month ago. Anyway, I'll dive into some of these things with Nitin. He's also an author of the book called Transformation in Times of Crisis. Really delighted to welcome you here, Nitin.
Thank you for having me, Raju. Great to be here.
Well, I have personally witnessed you for almost, 15, 20 years, your fascinating growth, your transformation for yourself. And, I always know, and we all know that the turning points come in our life when you're down and out and then something happens, and not everyone, we can rely on luck and things like that. But can you let's hear your story of what led to what looks like a personal transformation. And I've seen as I said, your personal growth. What do you think led to it? Is there a decision point when I last met you and you were at the asset management company in India, and now here you are? So talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think, if you reflect back on the 50 some years of life that I've had, especially the last 20, 25 years of professional life, you definitely have certain, pivot points or inflection points that stand out. There are a couple that do stand out, right out of business school. Conventional wisdom would have been, I'm an engineer, should be getting into consulting because, that seemed to be the best fit for my background. I had, a couple of interesting options to consider, but I made a very, strange, quote unquote, choice to actually go into financial services and join a quasi-government company that everybody thought was a very strange decision. But to me, that decision was made purely based on the fact that if I didn't take a chance when I was 23, 24, when would I take a chance to learn something that I knew nothing about? So I think that was probably in hindsight a great place to learn, even though it did test the character of working in a culture that was very different and very hierarchical, and yet I found the opportunity to really spread my wings and learn new things. And then, of course, the second personal pivot point was, and you had some of these yourself, Raju. Can't compare it to what you went through, but, surviving 9/11 in New York was a big one. There was no reason for me to be in New York. I lived in Bombay, but we were building a business that needed me in the US quite often. I lost a good friend of mine and a colleague. In fact, he took the meeting that I was supposed to be at. That was, I think, in a number of ways. I was 30, not even 30 years old. I was just about turning 30 that year. I think that was a big, in a way, I wouldn't say a wake-up call because it wasn't anything different I had to do, but it was just, it was too close for comfort. And while I didn't get on a plane for the next 18 months, for obvious reasons, but it definitely, I think it had a big impact on my personality. I started taking life a little bit less serious. I think there was a personality change that happened as a manifestation of that stark, close brush with reality that I saw. And then I think over the next, many years, you go through career choices and you do what you think is the right thing to do. But I think you talked about the asset management choice, and that again was, I've done this, I've done the tech and consulting world for a while. I built a joint venture with a very large US bank, set it up. I think that's when you and I met.
Yep.
When you were at Morgan Stanley. But, maybe I should be doing something different. So I think to me, the pattern that really does come across is getting out of the comfort zone, pushing yourself to take on, a professional engagement that you would really be uncomfortable with because you're like fish out of water for the first, 18, 24 months. Yes, it's exciting because there's a learning curve, but the higher up you go in your career, the higher the pressure also is, because no one's going to give you a free ride for learning. You have to also deliver certain business outcomes. So I think that was kind of the phase that I was in when I went into the asset management business, and I did come back into tech and consulting. And there was another similar, I would say, a pivot point when I had the opportunity to do something remarkable, because I partnered with Blackstone to buy this company called Mphasis out of HP. Great asset, great brand, but was a little bit of a has-been. And again, conventional wisdom, I got a lot of calls and messages from my friends when they found out that this is what I was doing. Hey, you're running a successful company called Intel. Why would you want to take a chance like this and go into a company that was so yesterday's company? And it's a big risk to your career. It's a big risk to your your credibility. And I think there's an interesting story that I still remember from my very first year at Mphasis. I was at a semi-sales meet, about 80, 90 people from the company, and I was meeting them in California at a pretty interesting vineyard in Garlic City, in Gilroy. And the whole idea was to get to know the sales team better, and nothing breaks the barriers better than wine, I guess. So this was like late in the night. This was the first time I was in flesh and blood with so many people from the company. I came into the company kind of laterally. I don't remember knowing anybody in the company at that point in time. And of course, I knew the stakeholders and the board by then. So we start going around the table, and somebody starts this sequence of you can all ask one question to the newly minted CEO, and this is going to be a no holds barred question. And hopefully the truth will come out of the answers. And I'm like, sure. So we start going around the table, and there's this one guy who'd been at the company for about 5 years. He says, I'm very curious. You came into the company, you knew nobody. We met you after you had joined. What was it that made you take a bet on all of us? And so the guy's name is Anil. I said, Anil, I can give you two answers. One that will make you feel better, and the other that is actually the reality. He says, no, I want the real answer. So I look him in the eye. There's pin drop silence by now, around the bar counter. And I can feel like 90 pairs of ears just itching for the answer. And my answer was, Anil, I'm very sorry to say I didn't take a bet on any one of you. I took a bet on me.
Mm.
I think that's kind of, in a way, you had to dig deep. Why you do these kind of things? Because one, you push yourself to find the next frontier. Two, it's not that you have a point to prove, but I think just finding, a purpose and a mission that aligns your passion, gives you the ability to make an impact. I think the impact really is the biggest motivator for me. How can I impact, not just the business, but the stakeholders in the business, right? Employees, customers, shareholders, families. And I think there are many, many stories about impact, especially during COVID, that I had the opportunity to make that impact. And it's very gratifying that I was in a position to do so. So I think that's a little bit of the background of the last 25 years of professional life, and a couple of the pivot points that I remember.
That's fantastic, man. So you're all about taking chances, and the chances that you're talking about is taking on chances on you. There's a risk to that, right? Because it's easy to fall into a safety mode. And so I think, well, I've certainly seen that you do that in person, but boy, I haven't seen you now in quite a few years, maybe 5 or 6 years. But yeah, so I think it is all about, the chances we take on ourselves and getting out of the comfort zone and all the leadership things that we all talk about, but then you're living them in different ways as well. So we'll get to the book quickly, because I know that that was a very hot topic during the whole COVID and post-COVID. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the book at its genesis. So Jerry Wind, is that the co-author of your
Jerry
book?
Wind.
And you,
Yeah.
Jerry Wind, and you wrote this book, as I said, called The Transformation in Times of Crisis. Hey guys, you're still listening to this, go get a copy. It's amazing to read that, particularly in these times that we're living in. So books are written for many reasons, right, Nitin? What led for you to, whose idea was it? What led to writing of this book? Who pioneered it? Who sponsored it, etc.?
Sure. I think we actually didn't start writing the book during COVID. The book was almost ready to be published as COVID happened, and it had a different avatar to it. and that's the backstory. It's in the book as well. Jerry and I met when we were doing a customer conference at the Wharton Business School, where Jerry was a professor of marketing, and he had just taken the emeritus status. And the workshop was really late, I would say late 2018. The workshop was around disruption and how to deal with it, because almost every enterprise was dealing with some form of tech-led disruption.
Right.
And the insight from the workshop into the workshop really was, how do you architect your own disruption so you don't get disrupted by somebody else, right? So the topic was architectural disruption. And the two or three key insights that at least I brought into the workshop, and I've been a keen student of tech all my life. I think everybody thought technology is leading disruption. My point of view was it's the consumer that's leading the disruption. Tech is just an enabler. Right? If you can't, as an enterprise, understand who your customer is and give the customer products and services that they really need, a highly personalized manner, then you're going to start getting disrupted. Whether it's at a business level or whether it's at a unbundling of your entire service landscape, and parts of that get disrupted. We've seen that happen to retail and media and payments, and I think it's conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
So Jerry was a moderator. I was a participant. At some point in the workshop, I got very passionate. I stood up, went to the whiteboard, started doing a drawing around business architecture. This is where the consumer is. This is where your business is. This is what you need. You need data and AI to be able to understand what the customer wants. You really have a view of the customer that that you can make to decide to offer products and services. How often do you get a call from the bank offering you a credit card when you already have the same credit card, and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So workshop got over. We were doing a debrief at the end, and Jerry said, I took a picture of that whiteboard drawing that you did. It's amazing. You should write a paper on it, because every enterprise that I talk to, needs this level of thinking. And I'm like, Jerry, I don't have really time to write because I just took on this role. I'm really busy, but I do like writing. Maybe if you help me write the paper, I'm sure you've written a couple hundred paper as a prof.
That's right, yeah.
So of course I've written a few hundred. So we agreed to meet again and start writing the paper. We get on a call 2 weeks later, and Jerry says, I changed my mind. I'm like, you don't want to help me write? He says, no, I changed my mind. You need to write a book, because paper won't do justice to the depth of insight that you brought into that session. And my first instinct was, I laughed and I said, you must be kidding. I never thought of even writing a book. He says, don't worry, I've written 19. I'll help you. I have two conditions. You have to be the first author, and all the proceeds have to go to charity. And I'm like, wow. Those are not conditions, Jerry. You're being very, very generous. So that's how we started writing the book in 2019. It took us about 15 months. COVID happened. The first manuscript was almost 80-90% done. The editor wasn't getting engaged. We basically decided to self-publish. But then again, in usual style, Jerry gets on a call with me in the end of March of 2020, about 2 weeks after lockdown, and says, we cannot publish the book because the disruption already happened. There is nothing called architectural disruption to be talked about anymore. No one's going to buy the book, because trust me, I'm a professor of marketing. No one's going to buy this book. So he convinced me to reconsider. And of course, I had to kind of go back and look at data in my typical engineering mindset. We looked at data and we saw that truly disruption had happened, whether it was e-commerce, whether it was telemedicine, even, art galleries and museums going digital. So we effectively said, well, then maybe the book has to be about how to use the crisis to accelerate change. And that's what the book ended up being. We self-published. We launched at the end of 2020. Probably the first book that came post the crisis that talked about the crisis. And I think the biggest takeaway for me from the exercise of writing the book is I think I learned a lot about myself.
So
it was a point of view.
Yeah.
It was a point of view that you had. I think it's very easy to, of course, we're all business guys. We love PowerPoints and easy to put it on a slide, but it is actually not so easy to make a convincing argument about anything. If you have to write it on in words, and you don't have the ability to convince people with your voice and your body language. So I think the first big takeaway was the power of conviction. Really matters when you have an idea, and to back it up with credible point of view needs a lot more work, and you dig deeper. So I think I kind of went deep into some of these topics. It is character building exercise. It takes a lot of patience. You've just written one. It's frustrating because you sometimes get this block that you thought you had a great point and then you can't put it on paper.
That's right.
But having someone like Jerry mentor me on on that journey was amazing. Having someone, some of the people that, we got in touch with when we were writing the book, including the father of modern marketing, is amazing as well. So I think I'm lucky that I had the opportunity, and I'm glad that I have a point of view that is out there. By the way, the other big takeaway from what you have to get over is you are actually exposing yourself with the topic when you write a book and you send it out in the universe.
In the world, yeah.
Your point of view is now black and white, right?
Yep.
And you open yourself up to critique, debate, disagreements, and some of that happened, of course. That's all in great life-changing manner, but it does happen.
I'm telling you, man, Nitin, I'm having seen this, and now I'm seeing this in a different way, from a different perspective. You're a guy that always gives credit to others. Yes, you are authentic in the way that you describe your feelings and what you had, and you're being so straight and honest. I just love that about you. So appreciate that. So in the just on the book. So I mean, I haven't gone into the depths the way obviously you wrote and what you were writing, but when you look at these frameworks and you see all that you're putting together, these 8 principles, I couldn't help but notice, when it comes to the third principle, which is called speed up digital transformation and design for personalization scale. You mentioned that the disruption comes from the customer, but oftentimes the customer doesn't know what they want, right? Where is the disruption coming from? So in today's world, technology is largely fungible. There are very, very few pockets of, wow, amazing disruption that's happening in technology. Of course, people's minds are working on whether it's AI or any of these other things, but the human brain is capable of a lot of things. So that continues. But in terms of using technology, making things better, it's fairly fungible. So what sets maybe perhaps Mphasis apart from your perspective? And then when I was looking at the first one, challenge your mental models and always stay ahead. I mean, that sounds pretty, I'm sorry to say, but fairly commonplace, pedantic in a way. But every company in every industry can find its opportunity, as you say, in crisis, if the executives use that as an opportunity and re-examine it. So there was that. And then you say, well, the disruption comes from the customer side. And then you're saying personalize it. So I was just trying to reconcile these two in my head. Could you just shed some light on if there is a relationship between 1 and 3 or any of these others for that matter?
I think there's a deep relationship between all the 8 principles. But the first one, which is challenging your mental models, is probably the foundational principle, not just for business, but in general. And I think this is the old school debate about growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
Yep.
And again, I had to go through that whole challenging my own mental model, even after I'd written the book with the first chapter as challenging your mental model. Because when Jerry asked me, to reconsider the book because he thought the disruption already happened, my first instinct was, oh, we put so much blood and sweat into writing this book. How can you tell me to not publish it? But then you take a step back and you really, really start challenging your own thinking. You realize that, there is a perspective that, you probably wouldn't have heard if you kept your mindset to be very fixed and really didn't challenge yourself. So I think it starts, especially at the leadership level, it starts with that whole concept around mental model. It starts with the whole concept around the art of the possible, because otherwise there would be no progress. There is no, I think time and again, whether it's innovation, whether it's application of that innovation, whether it is, Elon Musk didn't take, the world's first idea of electric car and turn it into a $1 trillion business, right? Yeah. Electric cars ruled the world 100 years before that. Right? At the turn of the last century, 1900, 50% of the cars in Manhattan were electric cars. So it's not a new idea, right? It's really about, how do you, the idea found a lot of favor with ESG and environment and the emissions. So I think that's a great example of, how you will continue to find opportunities if you really start thinking about challenging that model and really adopting the growth mindset. And then you talk a little bit about the fact that, consumer doesn't often know what they want and how can they be driving disruption. I actually think that's a little bit, insulting to the consumer because the consumer may not always want what they need, but they always know what they don't need.
Yes.
And they will vote with their feet. So I think the simple insight there is, given the digital revolution that started with the smartphone wave in 2007, with the launch of first iPhone, and the whole world became appified over the next 5-6 years. Everything turned into an app. Everybody thought it's a new channel. I think what we lost sight of was the fact that the level of empowerment the consumer got with the digital device in their hands gave them the ability to choose who they wanted to do business with on their own terms. Consumers weren't beholden to a business enterprise. And I'll give you a very simple example. In the earlier days, you wanted to do banking, you got to go to the bank between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m., 5 days a week. Yes, internet changed a few things, but really didn't change the model of banking. You couldn't still transfer money at midnight. You still had to wait for the next morning to do that. But given the explosion of digital-led companies that really started unbundling these inefficiencies, consumer then had the choice to not only deal with the bank, based on the brand of the bank, but also based on the experience that you get with the bank. If you let me do business with you on my terms, and it's easy to do business, I'm all here. If not, I'm going to take my business and go somewhere else. Right? So I think that's really what I meant by the fact that consumer is driving disruption, because consumers being given the choices by digital entrants that make them aware of what they can have, and they don't have it with their existing service providers or companies that they do business with today. So, consumer loyalty is no longer just to brands; it's to brands and experiences, and that's what really is the heart of what the disruption has been all about. And I think, having gone through COVID, we've seen what digital engagement can do. We're seeing a little bit of pullback in that right now, but I don't think the trend is going to reverse anytime soon. So I think if you then think about companies like Netflix, they really perfected the art of telling the consumer what they need to see.
Yep.
That is the reason why every dollar they invest in content has a 3 to 4 times higher chance of success than a traditional studio, because they're working backwards from what they think customer needs based on all the data they have on that customer. That's a perfect example of how to use tech to drive a very highly personalized experience for the end customer.
So I love the parallels you're drawing between your own belief system, which is the mental model, whatever you want to call it in the first principle, and then saying, well, how does it apply to my life? We all don't know what to focus on as far as what we want. We are constantly, it's so easy to come up with a long list of things that you don't want and don't want to face in your life. And it's the reverse of maybe 1 or 2 things you really want in life you're not able to describe. So I like that parallel. So in the Netflix example also, though, is it customer driven? I know it's a personalized experience, but how was it driven by the customer? So I guess you're saying it wasn't necessarily driven by them. Maybe this revolution that happened with the app appifying could be maybe the catalyst, but then you say, oh, this is possible. The customer says, well, then, give me more of this that's personalized to me.
So the customer stopped going to the movie theater. That was the disruption for the movie theaters. That was the disruption for the Hollywood studios. And yes, the customer drove it because they found a level of experience that was unparalleled and highly personalized. Right? So I think that's a good example of why the customer is driving disruption, and tech is just the enabler, because the same tech has been available to all the studios ever since Netflix launched. And Netflix itself wasn't really a streaming company to begin with. So I think there's so many examples, so many data points in there in just that one story.
Awesome. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit. So I was going to ask you, if you just said, how do you redefine, different standards? And so coming to what you've been through now in the 20 plus years, and now in this position that you're in, have you changed your own definition of success? Like when you say success on your terms, how do you redefine success for you, and how do you describe it today for yourself?
I think the definition of success changes based on the phase of life you're in and the stage of your career. Right? Of course, when you're early in your stage of career, you just want to be heard. You just want to have a voice. You want to earn the right and to have an opinion, and for someone to listen to your opinion. Because trust me, all of us start out with the idea that you can change the world, and then slowly you start getting harder and more hardened and more hardened. But the success definition early on is really all about Can I really make an impact? Can I really be heard? Am I going to be respected? You're craving for respect and acceptability.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, then you get all the other financial metrics in there and say, I want to be compensated well. I want to see growth. I want to create value. I want to have equity. Of course, you want to buy your house and your car and everything else that goes with it. And I think you come to a point where the parameter of success isn't financial anymore. It's really about impact, reputation, the ability to create a story that everybody gets inspired by, the ability to build a little bit of a personal brand that that becomes your legacy, and of course, at some point, the definition of success turns into what am I going to do to give back? How is the impact going to be on the larger group of people? Some people decide to go sit on board, some decide to go teach at business schools or whatever. The definition of success always will change. If it is just monetary, I think that's a very dry, purposeless kind of success criteria. Mm-hmm. But to me, at least, it cannot just be unidimensional. It has to be multidimensional, and of course, it's not an easy straight line ride either. Because remember, when you're looking to, at least in my case, when you take chances, there are periods when you feel completely desolate because you second guess your own decisions. You think you put too much at stake. You have to go find inspiration from somewhere without necessarily having to be able to talk to everybody because you jolly well know that being CEO is a very lonely job. Mm-hmm. You still have to project that confidence and inspirational outlook, but at the same time you have to dig deeper as well. So absolutely, there is no way you can have a unidimensional criteria for success and a unidimensional trajectory for that success.
So I'm sure by osmosis or otherwise, your team members and people who work with you hopefully feel that, and that you cannot be just using money as your yardstick for your success, I assume.
I hope so.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of the obstacles and turning points in your life. Everything, all the work that I do has to, is defined in bold terms or conscious terms. I mean, you wouldn't be here with the depth of the growth you've had and the continued session to go into depth, because it's the depth that causes you to be bold, in my opinion. But we define bold in the book and otherwise is that there are 5 elements. One is that you're ambitious. You're convinced about whatever it is. You're as you said, in your book, you had this thesis. Third, you're decisive. You don't need all the piece of information to make a decision. The fourth and fifth are 2 that are probably we've heard lots of controversy around. Oh, what do you mean by this? It's heart-centeredness, and lastly is humility. I see elements of all of that in you, of course. But what is it when I say being bold? What does that mean to you? And why is it important in your work today?
I think it is both in life and in business. You have to make certain bets, and you can't make a lot of bets. You have to make a few, but you have to make them in conviction. Mm-hmm. And I think to me, being bold really is about backing up your conviction with action and having the humility to course correct, because everything you're convinced about is not going to be right. And I think that's really the way we've built out our trajectory of our business. I've tried to follow those principles in life in general. For example, the bet we made at Mphasis in 2017-18 was about the fact that enterprise consumption of technology will pivot dramatically for the first time in the history of compute, where every enterprise will change the way they consume technology. Right? They will go from having everything in their control in their data center to actually consuming everything on demand as a service. Mm-hmm. That is just very simply the biggest bet we made. And now, you can say it's an oversimplification, but unless you simplify things, you really wouldn't know what your conviction is about. Right? I mean, technology is interestingly so many shiny new toys that you can just get lost in the minutiae and not really have a point of view on anything, but want to be able to do everything. So I think, to me, synthesizing, crystallizing those simple 2 or 3 high conviction, ideas that you want to really back, and then really going all out and of course, having the humility to realize what you need to change is definition of being bold. Also, I think the ability to carry people with you, because nobody can do everything by themselves. I came in laterally. I needed to carry the team with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be successful. And again, I've learned it the hard way. This wasn't my first CEO stint, but at least this time around, I really practiced the art of inclusion. Everybody asked me for the first 6 months in the company, what's your strategy for Mphasis? And my answer was, I have a point of view, but I don't really have a strategy because I don't know you. We will evolve the strategy together, and we will marry my point of view with your strengths. And what are those 3 bets that we make? But you will all help me decide that. And I think in hindsight, that was probably the biggest reason why I was able to align the company towards those goals.
That's masterful, my friend. Awesome. Well, it's one thing to say, it's another to implement. So you're proving it. Does any of this apply to outside your professional life? It's easy to talk about the work, of course, but clearly you must live like that too.
It does, knowingly or unknowingly. You learn the hard way not to carry being CEO at home because it doesn't work. Here, I think the ability to get mentored by a teenage child is probably the greatest gift, because you learn things that you never have otherwise learned.
Right.
Then how do you open yourself up to some of those learnings, and how do you take it back into saying, okay, maybe I haven't thought this one through. I think that's just the way to think about outside of work. Of course, I may be a great mentor to many people at work, but if I could just be half of that to people at home, then I think it'll be very gratifying, and that's the attempt you make. So
yeah,
it's it's as a human being, you can't be different at work and different at home, right? It's the same traits, the same characteristics that you carry with you wherever you go, whether it's interacting with your friends, your family, your parents, your child. I mean, it's the same. You have to be authentic, otherwise, you'll just be switching hats and eventually not really know who you are. So to me, it's a pretty straightforward thing. I am who I am at work. It's the old school WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. Hopefully you have enough, humility to continue to embrace new ideas, and today is a better version of me from yesterday, and tomorrow will be a better version of me from today. I think if you can continue to display that characteristic, I think it's going to be a long, fun ride called life.
Awesome. I always say the opposite of death is not life, but birth, and everything else is in between. So the other part of this is consciousness. So, a lot of what I talk about is, consciousness in general means being more aware, but we have had like 3 levels of consciousness that we define in our book as well, in our programs. Life is happening to me, which is obviously a victim mindset. All this stuff happens to me, all bad things happen to me. Number 2, life is happening by me. I'm in charge, the typical type A guy that, hey, I'm going to have nothing stand in my way and I control everything. And 3rd is life is happening for you or through you. People use that word interchangeably. What does consciousness mean to you?
I think it's all of the above in different phases. You can't just be in one phase all your life. There are times you feel control, lack of control. I mean, to be honest, first half of 2021 was life is happening to me because I can't control the fact that I'm losing employees every day to the Delta wave in India. You can't control it. You feel helpless, you feel powerless, and then you figure out what you want to do with it. But there are various phases in life where you cannot control everything. You have to have that humility to understand. And then, of course, there are phases in life where you have to have enough confidence to be able to control, what you really want to drive towards. And I think you can control a few more things in business than in your personal life. And then, of course, there are phases where you just go along because you're going with the flow. So I think to me, consciousness isn't really about being in control, isn't really about feeling the victim, but it's really about understanding how to deal with those different phases in different times. I mean, life is what happens when you make plans, right? Mm-hmm. Plans are useless. Planning is important. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit of that. To me at least, that's what it means. And hopefully, I want to make sure that I feel more in control than less. but at the same time, you have to sometimes just accept that you'll never always be in control.
Like the plans are useless and plans are important.
Planning is important.
Planning is important. You touched on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs earlier, right? Basically, we go through phases of life. Well, that's an observable thing based on, let's call it statistics and how the world has lived so far. But it's only the rare individuals that actually create impact, and that's very, very few in the world, as we know, and we can count them. That Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa. So people use those examples, Nelson Mandela, etc. But it's a lot of the things that we talk about are applicable to business or life as well. But truthfully, though, it comes down to you have to apply who you are authentically to whatever it is you do. So it's what they say. It's how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? So if you're constantly overly analytical, then that's what you do all day. So to make a change is very hard. So I kind of see what you said about the COVID. So the things those are out of our control anyway. But the life is happening through me or for me point is that it's all happening for our learning, right? Or our collective growth of some sort. COVID was a great example of the world, being completely challenged in ways that has never happened or hasn't happened in a long time. In the way that we're all ready for some new growth, right? So for those struggling, listening here to uncertainties of not just today, but hey, what's coming now? People are scaring people about recession and other usual things that happen every 8 to 10 years. What advice could you even possibly give someone like that who's a leader, is successful, but feels purpose, again, disconnect in purpose, and what is this now? The next phase.
Yeah, I think it is hard to, in a way, call these global events, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's the recession in the US or the Western world, whether it is potentially, the geopolitical situation in China. You can trust me, you can think and ponder all about those and go down in life, and everything will look very bleak. Mm-hmm. Or you can, what we call, you can't control the macro, you control the micro. You can control your actions and how you spend your time. And, all of us need sources of inspiration, me included. So just, staying focused on what you need to do to continue to progress your goals, staying focused on what gives you the happiness to feel like you're making an impact. And the impact has different meaning for different people, right? Of course, at the top of the list are the names that you gave, but the ability to even change one person's life in a positive manner is an impact. Yes. The ability to help somebody make a good decision is an impact. So yeah. I think it's whether it's an impact at work, whether it's impact outside of work. I know people who are super successful and 40 years old and decided to give everything up and go into philanthropy because that's what, one, they were fortunate enough to have enough financial freedom to do it. And two, that's what they thought was going to be their impact model. So I think different answer for different people, but what you cannot control, you cannot just sit back and admire, because we sometimes get into this mode of admiring really beautiful problems. Yes. Without really finding a way to get around them. So my only advice is the problem may be as beautiful as it seems, and you can sit back and admire it. And I think COVID was one of those things. It was so spectacularly, amazing in the way it just happened at one level because it was nature. And on the other hand, it was, how you deal with it was very difficult. So I think don't admire the problem, find ways to get around it, do what you can do to control, and small actions, small steps will eventually give you the answer.
Awesome. Well, that's wisdom right there, guys. If you're listening and watching, take note. Okay, so this, try to get to a closure here. I know we can go on forever. What have been for you, just maybe one or two, maybe three leadership lessons that you've learned, thus far in your life?
Probably a topic for my next book, maybe. But I think very first lesson, and it's not something new that you'll hear, is you have to be authentic as a leader. Otherwise, you're not really a leader. What's the number one thing needed to be a leader? Right? You need people to follow you.
Yep.
They won't follow you if you're not authentic. So you won't really be a leader if you're not authentic. You cannot put on a leadership style, or you cannot put on, anything, because that just doesn't work in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Second, leadership is not a popularity contest. You will have to do things that are difficult,
mm-hmm.
but it's not the things that you do, it's how you execute them that actually becomes important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the reason why, if you're authentic and if you're genuine in the way you're going about doing your job every day, hopefully people will see that, and you have the ability to then influence and get done what needs to get done. And I think finally, leadership is actually a privilege, because everybody is a leader. If you end up having a bigger impact or an opportunity to have a bigger number of followers just by the virtue of the fact that I run a company that has 38,000 employees, I think it's a privilege. So it's I would say top of those three things come top of mind to me.
That's awesome. That's very well, because those are the deep lessons that we all need to hear. We say that, or I talk about this, leadership or entrepreneurship or running a business is a spiritual journey, and you can't separate the two, because ultimately, if you're there to serve something, a purpose for your clients and for your team members and your stakeholders, as you said, it is a sacred space for you to pursue. And when you're pursuing that, you really raising the level, obviously, when you're contributing to whether it's goods or services. I mean, we talk about how many more pizza places do we need in the world? Well, somebody's bringing a new pizza of their own expression that's authentic and different. Otherwise, they won't survive, because they're serving at a different level. So yes, I think it is definitely these 3 great lessons, guys, if you want to take them down. All right. So one last question. I don't take anything for granted, Nitin. The wisdom, the learning that obviously you're shared is incredible. I've learned a lot from you over the years, and even learning never stops, as we just discussed. And I've learned a lot in this conversation. So in that vein, what discovery might you've had in this conversation, if any?
Again, I think the opportunity to just go through my life journey gave me the opportunity to really get grounded again. So thank you for that. Well, never forget. So I think you gave me the opportunity to really reflect on my own journey over the last 45, 60 minutes. And of course, I've seen your own transformation from what you did to what you're doing today, for a number of reasons. That itself is inspirational to me. So I think just keep inspiring, and thank you for doing this.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. I hope to have you more for your next book, or maybe other things you can share in life, and you can certainly call on us. Listeners here in the podcast, or people who are watching, is there a way to reach you? Do you want me to put some details for them to be able to
I think
find
just
you?
the LinkedIn handle is fine. There's almost the best way to reach me is through my LinkedIn, which is publicly available. And
Great.
of course, company website and everything else is available as well. But really glad that we could do this. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate it very much. So awesome. Thanks again. Take care.